So choosing the right investment strategy for you, I would say at the end of the day, there really is no perfect investment strategy as far as investing in real estate. There's so many different ways to invest in real estate, and they all have their pros and cons. At the end of the day, it's still a risk, so you got to understand what are the risks, what are the pros and cons associated with each strategy, and choose the one that feels the best for you.
Yeah, and I know we've been investing in real estate for 12 years now?
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of different strategies, tried a lot of different things, but when we started really growing our investment portfolio, it was after we were able to really dive in, talk to a lot of different people who have been in different spaces, do a lot of research, and identify what path we wanted to go down. And again, it's really easy to get stuck into analysis paralysis if you have 7 different types of investment tools that you want to go into. But if you pick a lane, pick one, and really focus on it, I know that's what really put us in a spot to where we were able to, grow our portfolio significantly once we did that.
Any strategy you pick, you're gonna skin your knees on it. That's all about the learning experience of it and what to do differently in the next investment. So I guess when we started, doing our research and diving in pretty quickly, we decided that the buy and hold strategy was gonna be the best for us to start our investment journey. Though we've done others, that came after that, buy and hold, I would say, has been like our bread and butter of our investments, and that's what most of our investments are right now. So what the buy and hold is obviously you're gonna purchase a property. That could be a multi-unit building, that could be a single family home, that could be a condo. You purchase a property and your intention is to hold that property for a long period of time and fill it with renters. And you're gonna be doing long-term leases in these buy and hold strategies typically. So they're signing a 12-month lease with you. Hopefully you keep that tenant for a long time. However, it may turn over every year as well. But once you have the property for a long term, there's a lot of benefits that come with owning that property in the future.
Yeah, and some of the benefits include there's some stabilization because you have one tenant you're managing, or it could be a multitude of tenants depending on what type of building you buy. You get the appreciation, so if the market goes up, you're getting that appreciation. You're getting depreciation, which is part of the accounting strategy, which is great. And then on top of that, because you have tenants in long term, and they're paying down your mortgage every month, you're getting mortgage pay down. So it's essentially building equity and putting that in your pocket while having an asset that continues to appreciate. So there's a lot of benefits to long-term holding. And at the same time, it is one more of a stable approach because you don't have new tenants coming in every month or every week or anything along those lines. It is a lot more stable than some of the other stuff that we'll talk about later today.
Right. So I would say the biggest cons, if you want to consider it a con, is, at the end of the day, you are a landlord, right? When you own a buy and hold investment. So you are going to be getting those calls when things go wrong with the property, the furnace breaks down, the toilet's leaking. So it is important to have, contractors who are lined up that you rely on that can get in there and fix those items. But you're typically going to have to manage that process. You can also get a property manager, but at the end of the day, you're still going to manage your property manager to make sure that your properties are being taken care of correctly. So I would say if you're not looking to be, if you are totally against being a landlord, you might want to rethink this strategy or really look into having a property manager to make it a little easier for you. But that's probably where you're going to run into the most con, I would say.
Yeah, and I always say, I know we started off managing our own properties. We still manage some of them. And that is where you find the biggest learning too. When you're managing your own property, maybe you lived in the property and you know it really well. But at the end of the day, understanding how the property runs, how to manage it is going to be a huge advantage to you in the long term. So that way, if you do get to a point where you can hire a third-party manager, like you mentioned, you know what to manage, you know how to manage that property manager, you know what's important within managing a property, essentially. So it's essential, I would say, to start managing your own properties right off the bat if you can.
Right, and overall, I've been really happy with the buy and hold strategy. I think it's something we're going to continue to do while we sprinkle in other strategies as well.
Absolutely. All right, so another really popular strategy right now, and I would say this became really popular over the last couple years, is short-term rentals. This is the Airbnbs, the AirDNA, or the VRBOs of the world. And essentially what you do is you buy a property in a desirable area and you list it as a short-term rental. And you'll have tenants come in and they may stay for a day, they may stay for a week, they may stay for 2 weeks. And the intent here is really just to maximize your profitability and get the most for your money in each day that you rent your place out. Of course, you want to buy in a desirable area. You want to know your AirDNA numbers. So AirDNA is just one way you can pull the data to see what occupancy rates are, what the average night is. But essentially, it is going to be more short-term, a lot more labor-intensive.
Right. So I would say there's a lot of pros to this investment strategy, and that's why it's kind of hit the ground running, as an investment strategy for a lot of investors out there. So typically what you're seeing with this is, we know people who have quite a few Airbnb properties, and they're typically paying off their entire year's mortgage in one summer season. So you can get a lot of benefits out of this. Plus, you can view it as a vacation home for yourself as well. Obviously the best bet is always to look at it as, primarily it's an investment, so you want to get it rented, but when it's open, you can go enjoy that property for yourself. Or you can even view it as, I just want to break even on this property, and I don't care if I, end up making money on it. I just want to break even and almost have a vacation rental for myself, at no fee to me. Obviously, you are going to be, putting in some work into it, which I would say brings in the cons.
I would say the biggest thing is you're running a business at this point.
Right.
It's not like a long-term rental where you have a tenant in there and you gotta fix a furnace every now and then or fix a leaky pipe, right? If something goes wrong, you have to fix it right then and there because people are staying and they're expecting a hotel, right? That's essentially what you're in. You're in the hospitality business at this point. So there's a lot more work that goes into it. You have to track reviews. You have to make sure you get positive reviews, right? Because one negative review can put you in a tough spot with the Airbnb world. So there's a lot of the negatives to it, but at the same time, your profits are much higher. So, or profit potential, I should say, is much higher. So again, it's all about picking the right strategy for you. And to your point, there are a lot of benefits to it as well.
So a next investment strategy that kind of works off of the short-term rental idea is called short-term arbitrage, which is really where you can get into the investing world in the short-term space, but you don't even have to own the property, which is, interesting to think about because you typically think you need to own the property in order to be an investor. However, with this strategy, what you're doing is you are signing a long-term lease with a landlord, right? So someone else owns the property, you're signing a year lease with them, and then you Airbnb that property. And you make whatever the spread is, after you've paid whatever your monthly lease amount is to the landlord. You're typically, paying a little bit of a higher than market rent for the place. And you're typically having to do some type of selling to the landlord as well, right? You can't just go in and say, okay, I'm signing a lease and then start Airbnb-ing it. You have to, make sure that the landlord understands what you're going to be doing with their property and they have to be on board with it. Usually by you paying more than market rent, ends up making it a win-win for, both parties, but that is something that all parties need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you get the same pros as a standard short-term rental, right? So you'll still typically you could potentially get better profits. You can maximize the return on investment within that property. And then at the same time, you may have something that you can visit every now and then. You can bring your family, you can bring friends. There's a lot of advantages to it. The negative, just like the short-term rental space, you're working with a landlord. You got to get a landlord to agree to doing this. There's regulations involved. So every state, every city has different regulations, and they are tightening up in the Airbnb space. So it's important to know, your regulations before diving into something like an Airbnb arbitrage.
Right, and I'd also say too, just you are also running a business here. It's not just, same with the short-term rental, even if you own the property, you are not just like being a landlord in that case. In those cases, you are running a business. So you're typically having like a social media page where you're marketing the property, you're following up to make sure you're getting good reviews. You're doing a lot of things to like run a hotel. So just remember that that is, you know, something that you're doing in both of those spaces.
And you do have to furnish the unit too. So there's another upfront cost associated with that. And if things do break, again, remember, you have to fix it right then and there.
Right.
You know, somebody's expecting, you know, if their water is not working, or if they don't have warm water for the night, it's not like you can wait till 2 days down the road, right? Somebody's expecting that to be fixed right then and there. So you just got to always be prepared to jump in and fix things immediately.
So the next investment strategy is the wholesaling space. So I know this is something that's kind of interested you in the past and you've done some diving into as well.
Yeah, and I know we've bought a lot of deals from wholesalers. It's a great lead stream for investors, and at the same time, it's a great way to get into real estate without really putting any of your own money into a potential deal. What it essentially is you're buying a contract from a seller, and then you're flipping the contract to a buyer. So essentially, you're the quarterback and you're basically pushing the deal from the seller to the buyer, and you're taking the spread on the deal. So it could be very lucrative. It could be something that, could make you some good money to be able to roll into some of the longer term strategies of buy and hold real estate. That's what a lot of wholesalers do. They start off in wholesaling and then they work their way into long-term rentals. Essentially, you're in sales, right? You have to connect with a lot of different sellers. You have to connect with buyers, and you have to market. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is marketing yourself and meeting with as many clients as you possibly can.
And there's a lot of pros to this investment strategy. I mean, again, this is kind of, this is investment strategy where you're not really owning the property ever, right? So you are finding the properties, you're sourcing it, you're getting it at a discount, and then once you're under contract, you're then flipping it to somebody else. And the seller understands that you're doing this as well. So, during that time you're searching for the buyer, hopefully by this point you've also accumulated buyers in your back pocket and other investors where you can easily flip it to. But you're just gonna have to do a lot of these, which is probably one of the cons. I mean, there's other cons as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest cons is, again, you're running a business. So it's heavily marketing focused. So the more you market, the more postcards you send out, the more sellers you talk to, the better your chances are of finding a deal that you could wholesale. You have to build a buyer's list. So having a lot of connections with different buyers is going to be really important, because you have to connect the buyer and the seller. You have to make sure some states are requiring licenses now. So understanding guidelines and rules within your state and your city that you're wholesaling is also something that's super important. And then on top of that, it is like I mentioned, it's heavily focused on marketing. So you have to spend a lot of money in marketing to make it happen.
It's old school sales. You're picking up the phone and you're making 100 phone calls a day to find those deals. So I wouldn't say this is passive by any means. I mean, it's a lot of work because you're continuously flipping contracts. You need to do a lot of these, right, to really see a great return on them. And you're making the calls. So it is a lot of time and effort, but once you get past that, you can eventually maybe hire someone to make those initial phone calls for you. So you can make it easier over time on yourself, but in the beginning, you're gonna have to do the legwork yourself.
Absolutely.
So the next investment strategy, I like to call this the HGTV special, right? Because this is the fix and flip strategy. We have seen so many shows out there. I mean, I can't even count how many shows there are, where people are buying distressed properties, fixing them up, and then selling them for a profit. So that's the fix and flip method. So typically what you're doing is you're buying a property that needs work. And I mean, this could be a multi-unit building, this could be a single family home, this could be a condo. the property needs work at the end of the day. Some need more work than others, but your goal is really to buy this at a deep discount because that's all gonna go into what your profits are at the end of the day. So you're buying this property at a discount, you're bringing contractors in, and you are renovating this property and getting it, up to where someone would want it a move-in ready property. And then you are putting the property on market once the work is done, and you're selling it to a buyer. And the goal with this is that when you take into consideration the cost of, selling the property that go into that, the cost of renovating the property, the price of the property itself, that you'll still have a lucrative enough profit at the end of the day when you flip it.
There's obviously some cons associated with this. It's a job. Again, at the end of the day, you have to manage your contractors. You're gonna have contractors that don't show up. You're gonna have contractors that overcharge you, that put change orders in, right? And you have to essentially ensure that they show up when they say they're going to show up. So there's a lot of that takes place when you're flipping a home. You have to make sure you're on budget. So oftentimes, in some of the flips that we've done, we've accidentally done flips actually, but you always go over budget. You really do. So it's a matter of having some cushion within your budget. And then at the same time, it is a day-to-day job. So you have to ensure that everything you say you're going to do gets done. It's not like it's something when you buy and hold a property for a long time and you only have to check in every couple months, right?
Time is money in this strategy.
Time is money. And the market can change, right? So you can buy a property today and expect to flip it after all the work is done in 6 months. And as we all know, things happen and those timelines do change. So in 12 months, the market could look different than when you were expecting to flip it in 6 months. So it's always good to have a backup strategy to be able to turn those flips into long-term rentals.
Right. So I always say go into a fix and flip with a plan B, just because the market by the time that you're finished with work may not be lucrative, and it may make more sense for you to just put a renter in there until the market gets to where you want it to be. But I would say there's a lot of pros in doing fix and flips as well. I would say, at the end of the day, you can see really big profits. Like on this, though, once you're finished with one, you're going to the next and you're going to the next. So it is a continuous thing. It's not very passive, but the work, you can get a big reward for it. So it can be a very rewarding investment strategy, and it's worked for a lot of investors, in the past too.
Sure has.
The next investment strategy is syndicating, and I know that this is, a investment strategy that has interested you in the past, and you've done a lot of research on it.
Yeah, and again, this is something where you work. There's a lot of syndicators out there, and essentially what a syndicator is they're an operator. They're the buyer of a building or a self-storage unit or a large set of properties, right? It could be anything and everything. And essentially what the syndicator does is they take ownership of the project, they raise money, and the people who give money to this fund or to this deal, they're essentially limited partners. And what's great about this strategy is as a limited partner, you're able to essentially get into a deal, get all the tax benefits of owning real estate. You get the cash flow, and you get typically higher returns than if you were to go to the stock market or something put your money into a money market, a stock market, whatever it may be, right? So there's a lot of benefits to getting into syndication. Again, you don't have to worry about managing the property. You have somebody doing that for you. That's what the syndicator's for. And essentially, you're getting mailbox money in your door every quarter, every year, whatever the payouts are. But it is a great way to get into real estate, being hands-off.
Yeah, and I would say the biggest benefit of it is passive. So, some people they don't want to do the work, which I get. You're obviously going to probably see bigger returns when you're the one doing the work. But if you just want to get into it passively and find another, strategy to put your money in, this is a great way to do it. The biggest thing I know we've talked about is you really have to vet out though who you're giving your money to.
That's where the work comes into play, right? You want somebody with a proven track record. You want somebody who you trust. You want to be able to you want to enjoy obviously working with them, right? You want to make sure that they've exited deals in the past. You want to make sure they have, proven track record with giving other returns. So those are all things you just have to make sure you do before you say, hey, I want to invest my money with this syndicator.
Exactly. So do your research on this, and there's still risk at the end of the day. I mean, something may not go to planned with those deals, so understand like what that looks like for you too, should the deal not go the way as planned. So you just have to ask those questions and understand in the contract what that looks like.
Yep.
But I mean, really with all these investment strategies, we've talked about 6 different investment strategies. There are so many more than that. We're really just scratching the surface at the end of the day. We could talk forever about each of the strategies that we already talked about. So at the end of the day, it's just really do your research, avoid too much analysis paralysis, because then you'll never get anywhere, right? You're just gonna research and then never invest in anything. But pick a path, learn about it, and then dive in.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece of advice I got right when we started off, I think we had 2 or 3 properties at the time. I talked to another investor who had 100 plus properties, and he just told me, he's like, you have to pick a lane. He's like, do your research, understand what your goals are, understand what you're interested in. Once you find that, go deeper into that one thing and master it. Because if you can master that, you can scale a lot quicker. You'll do better from a return standpoint, and you'll enjoy what you're doing. So again, don't go down the rabbit hole and don't get that shiny object syndrome. If you can avoid that, you can do really nice things in real estate and do very well.